Here's a number worth sitting with. 61.2 million Americans are now over 65. That's nearly 1 in 5 people in this country, and the system built to support them, Social Security, savings, pensions, was designed for a world where a dollar went further and a house cost less. That world is gone. The average Social Security check comes out to just under $30,000 a year. National Assisted Living now runs over $64,000 annually, and if you've been looking at retiring somewhere in the Western United States, historically one of the most desirable regions in the country, you've probably already figured out that California is priced out. The Puget Sound corridor is brutal, and Denver hasn't been accessible on a fixed income in years. But the West hasn't collapsed entirely, it's fractured. And inside that fracture, there are towns where the math still works. Places where home prices run 40% below the state average, where your Social Security check isn't touched at the state level, where a hospital worth going to is 10 minutes away instead of 3 hours. These aren't retirement fantasies, they're specific towns, with specific numbers and specific reasons they've held the line while everything around them got expensive. We're counting down 10 of them, from a cultural mountain town in Utah to the undisputed fiscal champion of the American West. Some will surprise you. One of them might be exactly where your retirement budget finally makes sense. Retirement isn't easy anymore, except in these 10 Western U.S. towns. 2026. Idaho Falls, Idaho. Idaho Falls doesn't lead with a headline. It doesn't have Utah's scenery rankings or Wyoming's tax reputation. What it has is something harder to find: consistency. The Snake River runs through downtown. Yellowstone is about a 2-hour drive north. The cost of living sits 6% below the national average. And Idaho Falls functions as the primary medical center for all of eastern Idaho, which means the hospital infrastructure here isn't scaled for a small town. It's scaled for a region. Average homes land around $390,000, with the median in the most in-demand zip code coming in closer to $351,000. Property taxes average $1,763 a year, among the lowest in the entire Pacific Northwest. That combination has a specific meaning for someone on a fixed income. Housing costs stay predictable, the tax burden stays low, and you're not driving 2 hours for a specialist. The labor market in eastern Idaho runs structurally low unemployment, and that matters more than most retirement guides acknowledge. When a town's economy is stable, its municipal services stay funded, roads get maintained, senior programs don't get quietly eliminated. The infrastructure retirees depend on holds up year after year. For the growing number of people planning to re-enter the workforce part-time after retiring, a trend that's accelerating in 2026, Idaho Falls has real opportunities in healthcare, education, and local commerce. That flexibility isn't available everywhere. The Colonial Theater is active, the arts scene is modest but genuine, and if grandchildren visit, Yellowstone is 90 minutes north, one of the most recognizable national parks on Earth, accessible without a plane ticket. Idaho Falls won't win superlatives. It delivers across every category that matters: cost, healthcare access, safety, and something to do on a Tuesday afternoon. For a lot of retirees, that's the whole point. Grand Junction, Colorado. Grand Junction is the largest city on Colorado's western slope. In retirement terms, that's not an abstract distinction. When you're 68 and need a cardiologist, largest city in the region means the specialists are here. The facilities are here. Grand Junction's healthcare accessibility scores 88 out of 100, a significant achievement for a city surrounded by rural territory. The median home sale price sits around $415,000, with listings frequently appearing in the $460,000 to $480,000 range. Not the cheapest on this list. But Grand Junction carries a sale-to-list ratio of 98.8%, meaning buyers in the right neighborhoods, Pear Park, Orchard, can regularly negotiate below asking. Colorado also did something significant for retirees in 2025. Senate Bill 136 removed the caps on pension and annuity income deductions for anyone 55 and older. If your retirement income comes primarily from a pension or 401k, that deduction can neutralize a substantial portion of Colorado's 4.4% flat income tax. For many households, the effective state tax burden drops near zero. Grand Junction's lifestyle profile matches its medical strength. Red Rock trails from your back door. The Colorado National Monument for weekend drives. a wine corridor that's genuinely worth exploring, a senior recreation center that doubles as a congregate meal site and social anchor. The Eureka McConnell Science Museum offers senior admission discounts and happens to be exactly the kind of place that holds visiting grandchildren for an entire afternoon without requiring a theme park budget. Grand Junction is the full-service option, not the cheapest, but the most complete package for retirees who've decided they won't compromise on medical access or outdoor lifestyle, and who've run the tax math to make Colorado work. And if you think Grand Junction is already a compelling case, wait until you see what's happening at 6,000 feet in southern Utah. Cedar City, Utah. Utah is ranked the #1 state for retiree happiness in 2026. Cedar City is a significant reason why. The town sits at 6,000 feet, which means 4 real seasons, not the mild, indistinct weather of low desert retirement towns. The Dixie National Forest begins at the edge of town, Zion National Park is under an hour south, and the Utah Shakespeare Festival runs every summer, which sounds like a minor detail until you realize that having world-class live theater in a town this size is genuinely rare. Average homes in Cedar City run around $400,000, with recent median sale prices landing between $430,000 and $435,000. That's the highest entry point on this list so far. But the cost of living index sits at 94, 6% below the national average, so everyday expenses offset some of that housing premium. Utah has the highest senior volunteer rate in the country. That statistic does more than look good in a rankings article. Communities with high volunteer engagement tend to have stronger social infrastructure, more programs, better services, more genuine connection between neighbors. Social isolation is one of the primary drivers of cognitive decline in aging adults, and Cedar City's community culture actively works against it. The Cedar Senior Center provides blood pressure checks, organized activities, and critically, transportation to medical appointments. For retirees who've given up driving or prefer not to, that last point is worth more than it typically gets credit for. One thing the research is direct about, Cedar City carries real environmental risk. 23% of its properties face major flood exposure, and wildfire risk is elevated across the surrounding region. That's not a deal breaker, but it's a serious due diligence requirement. Insurance costs and specific property selection need careful attention before any purchase here. Cedar City is the pick for active, engaged retirees who want their surroundings to feel alive, culturally, scenically, and socially. It costs more than the budget leaders on this list. It earns the premium. Rancho, New Mexico. Most affordable retirement towns force a choice, affordable or safe. Rio Rancho has managed to be both. The town's safety rating is 78 out of 100. Neighboring Albuquerque scores 65. That 13-point gap reflects a meaningfully different daily environment, one that matters for retirees who've spent decades in quieter suburban communities and aren't interested in adjusting. Median homes in Rio Rancho land around $311,000, less than 60% of what a comparable property costs in nearby Santa Fe. And while the town feels self-contained, it connects directly into Albuquerque's medical network, including the UNM Medical Center. Specialized care that a smaller town couldn't support independently becomes accessible within a 20 to 30 minute drive. New Mexico's tax environment has also shifted. Social Security benefits are now fully exempt from state tax for individuals with an adjusted gross income below $100,000 and couples below $150,000. That exemption covers the majority of retired households in the country. Rio Rancho's median household income of $88,395 points to a stable local economy. And as we've seen with Idaho Falls, economic stability translates into well-funded municipal services and dependable infrastructure. The Sandia Mountain foothills sit on the eastern edge of town, providing hiking trails and scenery that exceed what most towns this size can offer. Established senior lifestyle communities maintain organized social calendars and peer connection, so retirees don't have to construct that social life from scratch in an unfamiliar place. Property taxes run slightly above the New Mexico average at an effective rate of 1.18%. That's the trade-off for service quality and safety infrastructure. Whether it makes sense depends on your priorities. But for a combination of safe environment, metropolitan medical access, and genuine affordability, Rio Rancho makes a strong argument. Yakima, Washington. When people think about Washington State, they think about rain, gray skies, high prices, relentless cloud cover from October through June. They're not wrong about Western Washington, but Yakima sits on the other side of the Cascades, and it's a different state over there. Yakima gets real sunshine, 4 distinct seasons, a working agricultural economy built around wine, hops, and orchard fruit that gives the town an identity that isn't built around retirees, and it carries Washington's 0% state income tax, applied equally to Social Security, pensions, 401k withdrawals, and investment income. The median home value in Yakima in 2026 is $281,987, ranking it the 6th most affordable location in the Pacific Northwest. Average rent runs $1,183 per month. Property taxes average $1,953 annually. 16.7% of Yakima's population is already 65 or older. That's not a minor demographic detail. It means the town has already built the senior infrastructure to serve that population. Healthcare tuned to geriatric needs, established community programs with real participation rates, and a neighborhood culture where retirees aren't isolated by age. The 2026 home value forecast for Yakima is essentially flat, 0% change projected for the year. For someone buying on a fixed income, flat appreciation is not a red flag. It's a planning asset. You can model next year's market with reasonable confidence. That predictability has concrete value when you're managing a retirement budget that doesn't flex much. Yakima's municipal zoning has specifically prioritized affordable senior housing and the preservation of existing affordable units, a direct response to the displacement pressure that's hit harder along the I-5 corridor. And if you think the value in Yakima is impressive, wait until you see what's happening 90 miles southwest in Oregon. Klamath Falls, Oregon. The cheapest city in Oregon. That's Klamath Falls. Not the most famous, not the most photographed, the cheapest. Median home values run between $255,000 and $309,000 depending on the neighborhood. Average rent is $1,137 per month. And Oregon has no state sales tax, which means groceries, clothing, household goods, everything purchased in the state costs less than across the border in California or Washington. But the detail that separates Klamath Falls from every other budget-focused town on this list is electricity. In a survey of 402 zip codes across the Pacific Northwest, Klamath Falls ranked first for lowest energy costs. The rate comes out to just under 5 cents per kilowatt hour, nearly 3 cents below the regional median. On an annual basis, that gap translates into hundreds of dollars of savings compared to what retirees in comparable Oregon cities pay. The reason this matters specifically for retirement, Klamath Falls sits in a high desert climate. It gets cold in winter and warm in summer, which means heating and cooling costs are real and recurring. A retiree in a similar climate zone paying regional average electricity rates faces meaningfully higher monthly overhead. In Klamath Falls, that overhead is structurally lower, not because people use less energy, but because the energy itself costs less. Sky Lakes Medical Center anchors the local healthcare landscape. The town's economy runs on healthcare and renewable energy infrastructure, 2 sectors with stable, long-term demand. Crater Lake National Park is within range for day trips. Klamath Falls is the pick for retirees who've run the numbers and concluded that maximum monthly savings is the primary goal. Not scenery rankings, not urban amenities, sustainable, predictable monthly overhead. The numbers here are the strongest on the list for budget preservation, and it's not particularly close. Pueblo, Colorado. Denver is no longer realistic for most retirees on a fixed income. That's simply where things are in 2026. But that fact misses something important. You don't need Denver to access Colorado. Pueblo sits 90 miles south. The Rocky Mountains are visible from town. Lake Pueblo State Park is right there for hiking, boating, fishing, and the kind of outdoor access that draws people to Colorado in the first place. And the average home in Pueblo runs $283,780. That's nearly 40% below the Colorado state average. Pueblo's affordability is built on what housing economists call naturally occurring affordable housing, older, established neighborhoods where market rate prices are accessible without federal subsidies or income-based restrictions. The housing stock is real, and the price points reflect the actual market, not a government program. Colorado's fiscal picture for retirees shifted significantly in 2025. Senate Bill 136 removed the caps on pension and 401k deduction amounts for anyone 55 65 and older. For a retiree drawing primarily from a pension, that deduction can effectively cancel out Colorado's 4.4% state income tax. Stacked on top of that, the senior homestead exemption reduces property taxes by 50% on the first $200,000 of home value for long-term residents. The overall cost of living in Pueblo sits at 93, 7% below the national average and 12% below the Colorado state average. Assisted living costs run roughly $1,000 per month below what equivalent care costs in Denver or Boulder. Colorado spent years being the state that priced retirees out. 2025 was the year it started actively competing for them instead. Pueblo is the primary beneficiary of that shift. Las Cruces, New Mexico. 350 days of sunshine per year. Home prices 15 to 20% below Phoenix or Tucson, and a New Mexico tax exemption that removes Social Security from state taxation entirely for most retired households. That's Las Cruces in 2026. The median home price ranges from $285,000 to $350,000 depending on the neighborhood. Average apartment rent comes in at $994 per month, 39% below the national average. A doctor visit runs $125 to $150. Grocery costs run 4.4% below the national baseline. A retired couple in Las Cruces can maintain a comfortable lifestyle for somewhere between $3,200 and $3,800 per month. That same lifestyle in Colorado or Arizona costs roughly 40% more. The concern that always surfaces with towns this size is medical access. Las Cruces resolves it through geography. El Paso, Texas is 45 minutes south, a major metropolitan city with full-service hospitals and specialists across most medical fields. The international airport is there too, which matters for anyone with families spread across multiple states. Las Cruces gives you small-town overhead without surrendering access to major city infrastructure. New Mexico State University operates in town, and that presence carries more weight than most retirement guides assign it. A university town has younger people moving through it. There are lectures, continuing education programs, events, and a general energy that doesn't require a retirement community membership to access. The intergenerational character of the place is different and better than a master plan development built exclusively for the 65-plus demographic. The high desert landscape is genuinely striking. For anyone whose retirement vision was built around outdoor living in the Southwest, Las Cruces offers that environment at a cost that the competing Arizona markets no longer can. Spokane, Washington. Spokane combines top-tier hospital infrastructure with zero state income tax and a cost of living 4.5% below the national average. That combination doesn't exist in many places. Spokane is one of the few. Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center is ranked the 6th best hospital in Washington state. Multicare Deaconess Hospital operates alongside it. For the modern retiree, that's not an amenity. It's the primary asset. The research on retirement satisfaction in 2026 is consistent. Healthcare access now outranks both climate and recreation as the top non-financial factor in where retirees choose to live and stay. The housing market in Spokane is more expensive than most entries on this list. Single-family home medians sit around $425,000. Condominiums, however, start around $223,000, a genuine entry-level option that doesn't require sacrificing location or access to services. The overall average home value runs $395,325 with essentially 0% year-over-year change, signaling a stable rather than speculative market. Washington has no state income tax. That applies to Social Security, pension income, and 401k withdrawals equally. For a retiree drawing $30,000 annually from a 401k alongside Social Security, the state-level tax liability in Washington is zero. In a neighboring state with a graduated income tax, that same income faces several $1,000s in annual liability every year for the duration of retirement. Spokane is also expanding its housing options through legislation. Washington's middle housing laws now require cities to allow duplexes and accessory dwelling units on all single-family lots. For retirees who want to downsize without relocating out of an established neighborhood, those policy changes create options that simply didn't exist 5 years ago. The average commute in Spokane is 19 minutes. The city is walkable in its core neighborhoods. and it's large enough to maintain the cultural infrastructure, restaurants, theaters, community events that prevents the social atrophy that quietly undermines retirement satisfaction in smaller towns. Spokane is not the cheapest entry point on this list, but for retirees who've decided that healthcare infrastructure is the line they won't cross, it's the most complete package the Pacific Northwest has to offer. CASPER, Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't tax personal income, it doesn't tax estates, it doesn't tax inheritances, and it doesn't touch Social Security, pension income, or 401k distributions at the state level. There is no state level claim on retirement income in Wyoming. Zero. That distinction is worth 4 to 7% of a retiree's annual income compared to neighboring states with graduated income taxes. On a $30,000 Social Security benefit, that's $1,200 to $2,100 that stays in the account every single year, just from being in Wyoming rather than across the state line. Over a 20-year retirement, that compounding difference becomes a meaningful number. CASPER serves as the medical hub for central Wyoming, which means it carries the hospital infrastructure that smaller Wyoming towns can't support independently. The median home sale price in early 2026 is $300,000, approximately 34% below the national median. In desirable zip codes, average values settle around $343,492. Annual appreciation is running at 0.4%, modest, stable, and driven by fundamentals rather than speculation. For West Coast retirees sitting on high equity properties, CASPER enables a specific financial maneuver. Sell a California or Washington home, buy a CASPER property in cash. Keep the remaining equity in liquid savings as a financial buffer. That's not a theoretical scenario. Migration from the Pacific Coast into CASPER has been an active trend driven precisely by this equity transfer math. The overall cost of living in CASPER runs 10% below the national average across groceries, transportation, utilities, and everyday services. Average rent is $1,223 per month for those who prefer not to purchase. Homes sit on the market for 37 to 50 days on average. Long enough that buyers have time to evaluate without the bidding war pressure that distorts decisions in hotter markets. One detail that rarely appears in retirement rankings: CASPER is recognized for some of the strongest elder abuse protections in the country. That's a policy indicator that the state has thought carefully about what it means to age there, and has translated that thinking into enforceable law. Combined with a community culture that the research specifically characterizes as warm and socially engaged, the risk of isolation in CASPER is measurably lower than in less cohesive towns of comparable size. CASPER is not a luxury destination. There's no ski resort, no oceanfront, no urban energy. The winters are real. The landscape is high plains and unvarnished. What it has is a structural fiscal advantage that no other town on this list can match. A housing market that responds to rational pricing, and a state that has built its entire tax code around leaving retirement income alone. That's number one, and it's not particularly close. 10 towns, 10 different arguments for why retirement in the American West is still possible. The pattern across all of them is not scenery, and it's not just price. The towns that held the line in 2026 got at least one major structural thing right: the tax environment, the medical infrastructure, the housing inventory, or the legislative policy around retirement income. Often two of those, occasionally all four. CASPER got the taxes right, Spokane got the hospitals right, Klamath Falls got the monthly operating costs right, Pueblo got the legislation right, Las Cruces got the math right across nearly every category at once. The three states that appear most on this list, Wyoming, Washington, and New Mexico, are not coincidences. Wyoming and Washington operate without personal income tax. New Mexico restructured its Social Security exemption to cover the majority of retired households. Colorado followed with pension deduction reform. The states competing for retirees in 2026 are doing it through tax code adjustments, not brochures. The towns on this list are positioned to benefit from those changes first. One more pattern worth naming: the towns on this list with the most stable property values share one characteristic above all others: proximity to a hospital worth going to. Providence Sacred Heart in Spokane, the Albuquerque Medical Network serving Rio Rancho, Grand Junction's regional hospital system, Healthcare access is now the single strongest predictor of retirement real estate stability across the Western United States. That means when evaluating where to land, the hospital question is not a quality of life afterthought, it's a financial one. Proximity to quality geriatric care protects home value, protects the ability to age in place, and protects long-term savings from the catastrophic out-of-pocket costs that accumulate when high acuity care is far away and options are limited. Retirement has gotten harder. These towns are evidence that it hasn't gotten impossible. The difference between those two conditions is knowing specifically where the math still holds, and understanding exactly why each of these places continues to work when so many others no longer do.